Welcome everyone to our fourth of four Super Bowl 60 player prop release shows. Sean, Chris, and my buddy Matt Friedman finished up a little while ago, and now it's our turn, me and Grant, to fire at the board one more time before Super Bowl 60. The most important thing to know is that we understand these props can move very quickly, and they may be hard to find because of all the various markets you have to navigate for the Super Bowl. So we'll be dropping quick slip links in the chat on YouTube and Playbook. We'll be threading the show on Twitter with Playbook links. So make sure to click those and it'll take you right to the prop with the sportsbook of your choosing so you can quickly and easily make the bet. Grant, we made 3 bets each last week. Now we've had a whole weekend to stew on them and more markets have come out. What have you kind of just noticed over the last handful of days?
I mean, not a ton. I have found my favorite bet of the entire Super Bowl that we'll get to in this show, but I haven't noticed a whole lot of new markets that I really love outside of tails. I'm a big fan of tails this weekend. Oh man, one of my favorite bets every single year is the coin flip. If you can find it plus 100, which you can on a few sites. It's absolutely exhilarating. You're getting free entertainment, in my opinion. But yeah, no, I mean, I still I'm a Seahawks fan. I'm still on the Seahawks. I still think that they're the clearly better team. The more and more I dig into it, I think that Drake May could be in for some struggles in this spot here, and I think the Seahawks offense should be on the field a decent amount here. So the last show I went 2 Patriots bets, 1 Seahawks bet. This week this show I've got all 3 Seahawks bets, and I love all 3 of them.
Oh, baby. I'm excited to get to those. And again, we'll be dropping quick slip links for the bets that we can do them. Now, obviously, with some specialty markets, we may not have some quick slip links. And I know for my first pick, there won't be a quick slip link available. So I'll direct you to my first pick. It is going to be over on DraftKings, and it is going to be under the receiving props tab. So that'll get you set up so that you can fire for that one. And in the meantime, we will get to Grant's first pick. What do you got, Grant?
Yeah, first pick, I'm going Kenneth Walker over 2.5 receptions. You can find this between 125, 135, available pretty much everywhere. And I still like it at minus 135. And it's just because he's in a great spot here. Like the Patriots, looking into the data, they've been fantastic versus the run so far in the playoffs. I mentioned it last show, they've been incredible, averaging like 2.5 yards, under 2.5 yards per attempt against the 3 teams they've played so far in the playoffs. And granted, they're not the greatest running teams, but still, like they've been incredible off of a decent amount of volume versus running back. So I'm not expecting the Seahawks to run a ton in this spot, not nearly as much as they were early on the season. Obviously, they've gone more pass heavy second half of the season and into the playoffs when need be. Obviously, against San Francisco, both times they didn't really have to pass the ball at all because they were up so much. But they're going to probably pass the ball a little bit more. And the Patriots, 7th most targets allowed to opposing running backs on the season, 5th most receptions, and that's off the 11th least opponent pass attempts. And obviously, that factors in with playing the Jets twice and playing a few other bad teams that just obviously aren't going to run the ball a ton because they're down a decent amount. So it's a great overall matchup. Kenneth Walker has been playing more snaps, over 60% in each of the last 2 games without Charbonnet in there. And he should see mid 60 percentage in this spot again. So higher snap rate, should be on the field more and should get a little bit more passing game work. Obviously, with the run not being as heavily used in the spot, could see a little bit more use of him in the screen game. So bumping up his receptions even more. I think Sean is against the over on this, or maybe Cardi is. I can't remember. Someone was heavily against it. I don't care. I think there's a spot here where 2.5 is just far too low. I think he hits this probably about 65, 67% of the time. So I really like this over, even paying the juice.
Yeah, Kenneth Walker over 2.5 receptions is Grant's first pick. And I will say, I saw this earlier on Twitter. The most bet Super Bowl prop for at BetMGM was Kenneth Walker over 20.5 receiving yards, which of course correlates with the receptions. So sounds like Grant is on the public side here, which hey, that's public can win too. So I think this is a very popular bet in terms of the reception yardage. You're just going with the volume angle, so he doesn't have to necessarily have some long receptions. But I agree with you. I think obviously with no Charbonnet, Walker is going to be not an every down back. We certainly did see George Halani mix in a little bit in the conference championship, but I mean, I would say 85, 90% of the workload is going to be going to Kenneth Walker here. So Grant's first pick, Kenneth Walker, over 2.5 receptions. I believe the best odds are minus 125. So going to my first pick, if you've been following me at Action Network over the years, you know every year for the Super Bowl, I always have at least one bet on a player's first yardage outcome, whether it's his first rushing yardage or first reception yardage or first pass completion yardage for a quarterback. And I've yet to lose one of those, not only in my Super Bowl bets, but if you've been following, for example, in the Action Network Discord, I've posted around 5 or 6 of them this year throughout various games, and they've all hit. I've literally never lost one of these. So, of course, this is the one that's going to lose, and I hope you are. I'm kind of stalling, so I hope you're on that DraftKings receiving props tab because it's going to be a first reception yardage. And I am going to go with a guy we have been fading all year, especially if you've been tailing Sean Kerner. I'm going to go Cooper Kupp, first reception yards under 10.5. That's minus 120 currently at DraftKings. There is a 9.5 at BetMGM. Which is, I believe, minus 115. I'm fine with that, but certainly want that extra yard and a little less juice to the, about the same juice, but to the under, but definitely get that extra yard. Cooper Kupp has stayed under 10.5 yards on 10 of his 18 games that he's had a reception this year, including the playoffs. And I think he's been a little lucky to have 8 games go over this, given his median reception all year for all of his receptions is 9 yards. And if we break that down, right, his first reception is much more likely to come in the first half because, it's just earlier in the game. So if we look at the first half, when his first reception is most likely, his median air yards is 5 yards through the air versus 7 yards in the second half. So shorter passes that he's getting earlier in the game. And 12 of his 18 first receptions came in the first half. So, probably 65, 70% chance he gets his first reception in the first half of this Super Bowl game where his targets have been shorter. The New England Patriots, if we look at their profile defensively, they allow the 4th lowest yards per catch, 10th lowest average depth of target, and 4th lowest yards after the catch per reception to players aligned out wider in the slot, which is where Cooper Kupp will only exclusively be aligned. And if I look at players similar to Cooper Kupp, so a similar average depth of target and positional alignment, slot and wide percentages, New England has allowed a median of 7 yards per catch to wide receivers with the most similar profiles to Cooper Kupp this year. So 10.5. I mean, every sign here, Grant, is pointing toward the under.
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, obviously, you've looked into every single number, and it's not that high of a number. I know that people like it's obviously the Super Bowl. This is the time of year where everyone's betting more than they normally do, or more people are betting than normally do, just because they want to watch the game. And so you're going to get those people that are juicing the line up in almost every single scenario, every single prop market. So it's probably inflated just due to that. And I mean, people think, oh, what's 1 yard difference? 9.5, 10.5, 10.5, 11.5. It's a massive difference on this type of market, one catch market, especially with how low his A dot is. So I love it.
Yeah, so I know in 2020, 2 Super Bowls ago, we hit Christian McCaffrey over 3.5 rushing yards on his first rush, cleared it on the first play of the game. Last year, I had Jalen Hurts' first rushing yardage over 2.5 yards, which was laughably low. And I took Xavier Worthy's first reception yardage under 9.5. All of those have hit, so we're trying to keep the streak going. Hope this Cooper Kupp first reception stays under 10.5 yards. Now, before we get to our second picks here, I mean, if you guys follow me, we have an emoji or emote or whatever it's called for it in the Action Network Discord. I like drinking Tecate. Grant, he loves his Taco Bell, but one thing we both love is Action Pro. And in honor of Super Bowl 60, we're giving you $60 off a year of Action Pro. We're all going to be dropping more picks leading up to the Super Bowl, even though we don't have any more prop release shows, right? We'll still be tracking some more picks all the way up to the Super Bowl. And with Action Pro, you get real-time alerts when myself or Grant or Kyle Murray, Sean, Chris Raybon, any of these guys, Stuckey, Brandon Anderson, all of them. Anytime they release a pick, you don't have to wait 30 minutes when the line might have moved already. All that plus real money, bet and percentages across our pro player prop projections and more. That's $60 off for Super Bowl 60. Head to actionnetwork.com/pro now to take advantage. All right, so Grant gave his first pick. It was Kenneth Walker over 2.5 receptions. I gave my first pick. It was Cooper Kupp, first reception yardage under 10.5 receiving yards. Now for our second pick, Grant is sticking with the Seahawks theme. What do you got?
Yeah, and I'm just taking the spread -4.5. You can find anywhere from -108 to -115, -101 plus 102 if you're going on the prediction markets. So it's pretty close to split between who's going to cover based on all the books. But I think the Seahawks are just drastically better team. I mean, we look at what Drake May has done so far in the playoffs. He has not been the same quarterback going up against top tier defense. He's struggled very heavily. He just went against the second overall DVOA and third overall DVOA defenses the last 2 weeks, and now he gets probably his toughest spot yet. And it's a spot here where I think that he struggles heavily. Looking at the personnel, defensively, it's not even remotely a question. Seattle is unequivocally better by a massive amount. Special teams, it's not even remotely close. Seattle is one of the top, if not the top special teams team in the league. Patriots, middle of the pack, below average. And then on the offensive end, if you look at the season as a whole, obviously Darnold had some more struggles early on in the season. He's been much better the second half of the season and into the playoffs than Drake May has, really. Like running game, probably pretty even. I'd probably give a slight lean to the Seahawks. So they're better at pretty much every single facet of the game if you incorporate Drake May's recent struggles. So getting 4.5 points on the clearly better team that has covered in 10 at this number in 10 of the last 14 games. Once against the Colts, they did not cover. The other three times was against probably the second best team in the league, the Rams. They did not cover. So they've been covering this at a huge rate. Obviously, a lot of the opponents were easier than the Patriots, but they're just better overall. And I mean, the Patriots, we don't know a ton about how good they actually are. They've obviously had some of the easiest opponents any team going to the Super Bowl has ever faced, considering their strength of schedule this season. So there's a lot of room for error. If they're as good as you think they are, given their strength of schedule, then they're going to get crushed most likely. If you kind of don't even take schedule into account, they're still probably a 5.5 point dog. So best case scenario, you're getting a ton of value. Worst case scenario, I think you're getting a little bit of value still.
Well, Grant, one thing you didn't mention was the luck rankings, and I know you're a big fan of them. So the luck rankings have Seattle as the unlucky team here. Now, it's not a D grade or a C or a B or an A, it's an F grade, but just to point out, Seattle has been the unluckier of the two teams, both based on record luck and scoring luck. And when I run my expected scores model, schedule adjusted expected scores model, and recency weight them, I'm getting Seattle as 5 point favorites. So, if 5 is such a dead number, though, that it's hard to say. So I think 4.5 is a fair line, but I definitely would lean towards Seattle covering the 4.5. So you'll be glad to know the luck rankings are right there with you. So Grant's second pick, Seattle Seahawks to cover the 4.5 point spread. For my second pick, this is going to be a kind of a standard market. And, this is a market I've loved, especially when we're betting on Christian McCaffrey to stay under this. But I'm going to go Ramondre Stevenson to stay under the longest rush of 12.5 yards, which you can get right now at FanDuel at -114. And it's specifically 12.5 at FanDuel. It's 11.5 a lot of other places. Grant, Seattle has allowed one explosive run all year on 174 rushing attempts faced when the running back is using a man or a gap scheme, right? So when the blocking is man or gap scheme rather than zone blocking. And that one was on a draw, but Ramondre only has 4 draw plays all year, but over 60% of all of his carries are man gap scheme runs. And so it's going to be really a struggle, I think, for Ramondre Stevenson on these. He might pick up a handful of 4 or 5 yard runs, especially with the way Seattle plays light boxes at a high rate. But that also lets them see where these guys are going, Ramondre and these other running backs are going, and especially against man gap where they play, well, it's like a gap and a half scheme or something like that defensively. It is the perfect defense to stop these man gap scheme runs. Like I said, they've only allowed one explosive run all year against man or gap scheme runs and 174 rushes faced. And in fact, Seattle's only allowed 7 rushes all year, including the playoffs, longer than this 12 and a half yards that we need to clear to running backs. And 3 of those were to the best offense in the NFL by rushing DVOA, the Los Angeles Rams, where Kyron Williams had 2 and Blake Corum had 1. So, you remove those, just like you were talking about removing the Rams game earlier. The Seattle's only allowed 4 all year, and one of them was a draw, like I said, to Jordan Mason of the Vikings, which probably isn't what's going to happen here with Ramondre Stevenson. So we're really talking maybe 3 rushes all year that have cleared this by opposing running backs. And New England's 21st in offensive rush DVOA. Like I said, the Rams were first, and they had 3 of those. So my worst case estimate has minus 114 for under 12 and a half as a break even bet, but that's absolutely my worst case estimate. Every other estimate I use, if I use my rushing attempt projections or Sean Kerner's or Chris Raybon's, and if I use better or different estimates for the rate of clearing 12 and a half allowed by the Rams, or sorry, by the Seahawks or Ramondre Stevenson or NFL averages, everything else pretty much gets me north of 60%, with some as high as 65 or 70%, depending on, which estimate you use. So I think at worst case scenario here, we have a plus EV or a break even bet, but almost certainly a nice plus EV bet here.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. I mean, like you said, like 12 and a half is a tough number versus one of the best defenses in the league. And something that we don't really know is what the snap count is going to be for Stevenson. Obviously, Henderson was playing roughly 25 to 30% of snaps almost every single week. Last game, it was 6, I think. Stevenson had 94% of snaps played. So it's a spot here where even if we assume that Stevenson plays 90% of snaps, which I kind of doubt is going to happen. It could still happen. Even at 90% of stats, when you look at all the numbers, how many times Seattle has allowed this, especially outside of playing the Rams, it's still unlikely to hit
Yeah.
if they give Stevenson 90% of snaps. So, I mean, it's just a tough spot here. Plus, them being dogs could eat into his usage even more.
Mhm.
Obviously, there is the chance that Seattle just completely blows him out. So, in almost all scenarios, this is a plus EV bet taking the under at this 12.5 number.
Yeah, and like I said, I was talking my worst case scenario where I'm using the market implied rushing attempts. So his line is pretty much 14 and a half across the board, slightly juiced to the under. So I said 14.25 rushing attempts. And, some of those are going to come within 12 yards of the end zone. So he can't even break it beyond that. So really his rushing attempts that are potentially able to clear 12 and a half yards is even lower than that. Well, Sean Kerner's full game estimate is 13.7. Chris Raybon's full game estimate is 12 and a half. And again, that's including ones coming inside 12 yards. So again, I'm being as cautious as possible in having this be a break even bet. So for our second picks, Grant is on the Seattle Seahawks to cover the 4.5 point spread. I have Ramondre Stevenson longest rush under 12 and a half yards, which you can get exclusively at FanDuel at minus 114 odds. So it's time for our third pick. And Grant, I think this is the one you're alluding to, might be your favorite bet of the Super Bowl. Is that right?
Yeah, and I almost never bet this market. I'm going with the Super Bowl MVP market, and I'm going with JSN to win plus 550. Now, I know that historically this is a QB award, like almost what 70% of the time, 80% of the time, depending on how far back you go, it goes to a QB. 5 out of the last 21 awards have actually gone to wide receivers. Granted, I made that break off if you go an extra, it was a long time before one before that. But since Deion Branch won, 5 out of the last 21 have won Super Bowl MVP. Now, Darnold, his passing line is currently set at 229. JSN's line is set at 95 receiving yards. Heavy juice on the over at 6.5 receptions, and pretty much even money to score a touchdown. These are the lines of the wide receivers that have won Super Bowl MVP. Branch, 11 catches, 133 yards. Ward, 5 catches, 123 yards, a touchdown. Cooper Kupp, 90 yards. 92 yards actually, 8 catches, 2 touchdowns. Julian Edelman, 10 catches, 141 yards. And for some reason, I can't find the other one here. It's somewhere around here, but another similar, I think it was Heinz Ward, or I already said. So not any spectacular games. Like, again, no one has gone for over 132 yards and a touchdown in this spot here. So this is a spot here where JSN, his not quite median, but his 30th, 40th percentile outcome is in line with those guys there. He has the largest target share in the league by a decent margin, sitting over 35% on the season. And this is probably the largest target share we've seen. I mean, at least as far back as I can remember, the last 25 years, the closest we had to it was back Cooper Kupp, who won the MVP with a pretty large target share because they had OBJ as their second wide receiver. So this is a spot here where not only are we getting the potential best from a stats standpoint, wide receiver in the league, but also the highest target share. And Sam Darnold isn't a guy like Patrick Mahomes, like Tom Brady, any of these big name quarterbacks where
Yeah.
you err on the side of we give them MVP. This is Sam Darnold, a guy that everyone expects could potentially blow the game here. So there's going to be more momentum going towards JS in the spot, especially if he gets a big catch early on. And I would not be surprised. I don't think anyone would be surprised to see 2 touchdowns, 10 catches, 140 yards from JSN in this spot. Seattle minus 200, roughly minus 210 juice if you take out the VIG on both sides. So roughly a 68% chance of winning this game. So in that 68% of the time, he's probably going to win this at least 1 out of 3 would be my opinion. Like probably closer to, honestly, I think 1 out of 2. I think this line is way off here just because of the amount of volume he's getting. Obviously, Kenneth Walker could end up getting it. Obviously, a defensive player could have a massive play like happened the last time the Seahawks won the Super Bowl. But I think JSN is by far the most value on this pick, and it's not remotely close.
Yeah, I mean, just given how dominant he has been this year, and like you said, the largest target share of any wide receiver this season, highest we've seen in the Super Bowl in years, those definitely make a lot of sense. And, I think it was funny, you mentioned Cooper Kupp winning MVP, and now I'm giving Cooper Kupp under 10 and a half yards in his first catch, but just kind of coming full circle here with these. I will say, I do think that defensive props, I gave out 2 defensive interceptions last week on the Seattle safeties. If they return a pick 6 and maybe grab a second interception in the same game, they could definitely win it. So I don't hate a little sprinkle on the safeties, but certainly I think I agree with you. JSN MVP is probably the best MVP value on the board. So Grant, pick 3, Jackson Smith and Jigba, MVP plus 550. For my third pick, I'm not going to reveal the pick yet, but Grant, what if I just told you we could get a player who had 57% of his touchdowns come in a specific quarter, which also correlated with his just overall volume, so it wasn't luck based, yet his longest odds for a specific quarter to have a touchdown are in that quarter. And there's no matchup concerns. I mean, that's basically an auto bet, right?
I mean, it seems like the book messed up, and you are smart enough to find their mistake, like you always are. So what? Now you got me curious. What is it?
Yeah, well, it is the Seattle Seahawks tight end, AJ Barner, to have a third quarter touchdown. You can get that 12-1 at FanDuel. Also, his second half touchdown, I believe, is 6-1 at Bet365. It's still 5-1 at FanDuel as well. I like those. Like I said, 38% of Barner's targets have come in the third quarter. 38%. That's by far the most of any quarter. It's more than the 25 you'd expect if everything was distributed equally. And 4 of his 7 touchdowns this year have come in the third quarter. Yet he has the longest odds for a third quarter touchdown. He's 11-1 in the first quarter, 8-1 in the second quarter, 12-1 in the third quarter, whereas that's the longest, and 8-1 in the fourth quarter. So I think that's kind of crazy. And if we just look at second half, which also includes overtime at FanDuel, I need to look up the rules at Bet365 if it includes overtime. But either way, I'd still like it because you're getting 6-1 there. 60% of his targets come in the second half and overtime, as well as 6 of his 7 touchdowns. And yet we're getting a little bit longer odds on the second half than his first half, probably because Seattle's favored, but they're not favored by as much as they've been favored in a lot of games this year. There's certainly a chance they're trailing in the second half and need to throw a little more. He's also potentially a tush push touchdown. He did have one rushing touchdown this year. And like I said, there's no real matchup concerns. New England is mid pack versus tight ends in efficiency and in volume. So, we can kind of just stick with his general averages as what we can expect for him here against the New England Patriots. So I'm definitely finding a lot of value on this third quarter touchdown. I can't believe it, Grant.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I'm betting it now.
Yeah. So AJ Barner, third quarter touchdown, 12-1. Also like his second half touchdown, 5-1 at FanDuel or 6-1 at Bet365. So that's going to do it for us. Make sure if you haven't already, you download the Action app. Make sure you're following both Grant, Neiffer, and myself, Nick_Giffen. You'll want to do that as we'll still be firing our picks between today and Super Bowl Sunday. Have those alerts turned on, those notifications set to instant so that you get them instantly. And with Action Pro, you will definitely get those instantly instead of on a 30-minute delay without Action Pro because, like I said, sometimes we end up moving these lines a little bit quickly. So that'll do it for this show. We only got one more show left, I think, for at least for me, and that is Bet What Happens live at halftime of Super Bowl Sunday, where we'll be live betting the big game during halftime. Who needs Bad Bunny? Who needs any of these other ones from past years? I love them all. They're great shows. Don't get me wrong, but you can't make money watching them, and you can make money watching Bet What Happens live. So join us at halftime of the Super Bowl in the Action Network Discord while we live bet as our last chance to bet the NFL this year. So until then, good night and good luck, everyone.